Hi, this is Mariah Gullo from The Hollywood Reporter, and I'm in studio today with Justin Hurwitz. Hi. We're here to talk about First Man. Mm-hmm. You are the composer of First Man. Tell me about the overall themes that brought you into your score.
The overall themes, Damien wanted to explore grief, loss, kind of a sort of pain. He wanted to also use those themes in different ways throughout the movie, so we could use the same themes that scored some of his, very painful moments early on to also score these incredibly triumphant moments later on, the launch and getting to the moon, landing on the moon, all of that. But he wanted even those moments of the movie to be kind of underpinned with a little bit of the earlier losses, because it's a lot of the stories about Neil and Janet and their family overcoming, a lot of difficulties, a lot of losses of first their daughter and then some very close friends and colleagues of theirs. So those were the main feelings Damien wanted to get at.
Right, and the movie really highlights the fragility of the space program, just how fragile the men are who are taking place in it, and the fragility of the spacecraft itself. So how did you kind of translate that into song?
I would say the fragility, a lot of that was through instrumentation. Mm-hmm. We had our themes worked out, but we didn't know exactly how to score a lot of the scenes until we actually saw them. And when we saw the way that they were shot with that very sort of handheld documentary style, and we saw how intimate the camera was, how close on people's faces the camera was, and how really how those scenes were played, some instrument ideas sort of just came to us, like harp. Harp has a very delicate nature, and every note is kind of sounds a little differently. Every note, some notes kind of hide and some notes pop out, and it just has this very sort of human and fragile quality to it. Mm-hmm. And so that seemed to work really, really well against some of the scenes, particularly the family scenes, the domestic scenes. And then later, as the movie progresses, we start hearing more and more theremin, which is an electronic instrument, which has this very almost voice-like quality. It can sound like wailing or crying, and it's kind of in all the cues, but we keep it kind of buried under the orchestra, the instruments for a while, and then it starts coming more and more to the front later in the movie, and it's sort of the sound of the really overt emotions of the movie. It's kind of Neil's most inner pain coming out, especially as he reaches that final mission and eventually gets to the moon.
Now, the theremin, it's such an interesting instrument for you to choose, because it's kind of a loaded instrument in that it has this history of being, a sci-fi movie instrument from the 50s and the 60s. Yeah. So were you kind of playing into that, or were you trying to kind of reinvent the use of the theremin in your score?
Well, we thought it's cool to have some sci-fi flavors, because it's sort of like these astronauts are going off on a sort of science fiction mission of their own. They're going off into the complete unknown. They have no idea what they're going to find. If they're ever going to come back, it's a very sort of haunting kind of mission they're on. But we wanted to use the instrument kind of differently than we're used to hearing it. When Damien first suggested it, he said, can we use a theremin, but can we use it really emotionally? Can we use it really melodically, really lyrically, really emotionally? So it's not there as just for the sake of weirdness, for the sake of alienness. It's there. It has those qualities in it, but can we use it to like, what does our melody sound like on it? Could our melody be played really emotionally? And that was one thing I found that was so exciting, was not only could our melody be played on it, but that the melody was particularly expressive on it, because the theremin is so it reacts to your every little movement, and you can just add it has a real sort of human quality to it. It's very electronic. It sounds very electronic, but because it's sort of responding to you, and because you can add vibrato to it, and because you can sort of slide into the notes, it just has this very emotive quality, and it can be used, really lyrically.
You're kind of bringing it back to what it was originally invented to do, which was to be an orchestral instrument. That was the original invention of the theremin. It was supposed to be in every classical orchestra pit. So it feels like you kind of revived it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, people have been playing it, have always been playing it, and I've seen some incredible. I learned a lot about it just from YouTube videos, and I've seen some incredible performances of people using it with orchestras, sometimes as a stand-in for a vocal, sometimes replacing, like, in an opera, or, replacing the soprano vocal or whatever in an opera. I've seen a lot of really interesting uses for it. Yeah, we didn't know exactly what we were going to find. Like I said, Damien suggested it, and I got one and just started messing around with it, and it just seemed to work. It just seemed to work really well, and we had to be careful with where it was sitting in the mixes to make sure that for most of the movie it could sort of sit in with the orchestra and almost be a voice of the orchestra. Mm-hmm. I do use it throughout when we're trying to use it in the more subtle ways. I do use it as a little sort of counter melody here and there, almost the way I give it lines that you might give to a clarinet. If there weren't a theremin there to use. But then towards the end of the movie, we let it really come to the front and really kind of sing and carry some of those cues. And like I said, that's particularly when we want the music to start blossoming and becoming more and more emotional. And it's really as we get towards the moon that we let the theremin finally come to the front.
How long does it take for a film score to leave you? Are you on to the next project as soon as it's locked, or does it kind of stay with you for a while?
I think it definitely does stay with me. I think about it, I hear it. I've only worked so far on Damien's movies, and we've worked, since I'm sort of working at his pace, it's been a lot of time after the movie. In other words, I haven't really jumped directly into other scores yet, because we finish the movie and then we release the movie and we kind of live with it for a while, and then as he gets into prepping the next movie, that's when I get started. So it's been a pace that's allowed me to kind of come to terms with the work and think about it. And I listen to the old soundtracks sometimes, not a lot, but I listen to them sometimes just to sort of remind myself what we did, and I tend to focus on the problems with things, trying to become better at that, not always focusing on the negative. I mean, I'm certainly proud of the work, but I listen back to a lot of my older work on La La Land or anything else and think, I wish I would have done that differently. I wish I had. I hear a lot of my own poor choices and think, but it's a learning experience too, because then I try to make better choices the next time.
Yeah, and you've won two Oscars since La La Land. So from that movie to First Man, what have you learned? Do you have any new perspective?
I mean, there was a lot to learn in this movie. There were a lot of new. It's the first time we've ever done any kind of electronic music. So beyond the theremin, there were synthesizers, vintage modular synths. There was actual kind of musical sound design. There was creating some sounds and sampling them and making an instrument out of that. There was all that sort of stuff that we'd never done before, so that was fun. Every time I orchestrate something, I learn what works and what doesn't work, and that's just always going to be a learning process. I've only gotten a few tries at it to orchestrate, hear it with an orchestra, I realize what works and what doesn't work. So that I feel like I take a step each time. This is the first time I conducted a score, so that was really fun, but also, I'm in a very steep part of the learning curve for that. So there's always something, and I hope that every score we do, that there can be some kind of real new ingredient or new thing to learn or to try out, whether it won't necessarily be a new instrument each time, but maybe it'll be like a different harmonic language, like a drastically different melodic or harmonic language the next time. Whatever it is, I'd like to keep really trying something very different each time.
Is there anything you learned about Neil Armstrong through this, like his life? Like, were there any kind of takeaways for you about this movie in general?
Well, I didn't know anything about him other than the very basic stuff that everybody knows, which is he was the first person to go on the moon. And so the rest of the story was all new to me, and I had no idea what his family life was like, some of the things that dealing with the loss of a child, and sort of the way he threw himself into his work after that, sort of how strong and stoic Janet was, and he was, and the whole family was, and how much they sacrificed as a family for this historic thing. And we really only know the end of it. We just know the glory of it, but everything that they sacrificed or were willing to sacrifice along the way, that was all new to me, and I just thought that was really poignant.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the theremin, did you play all the theremin parts?
I did. I wasn't planning on it. I think when I got the theremin, I was probably thinking that, well, in the end it'll be played by a professional musician like all the other instruments, but over the course of working on lots of demos early on and then making the cues, and I was playing in the parts each time, which demo parts just kind of ended up being real parts. I would end up playing, every time we change a cue, I'd have to replay the theremin part. Well, I'd have to replay it a million times just to get it right in the first place, because I'm far from a professional level theremin player, so I would play it over and over and over again to try to get it right, or try to get like pieces of it right and piece together the best parts. And also every time we change the cue, I would have to replay it, because it's not a MIDI instrument like the other parts of the orchestra when you're sketching it in or composing. It's if you make a mistake or if you change something, it's audio, so you have to re-record it. So over the course of it, I finally got down some performances that Damien was happy with and we liked, and they just stuck. But I don't think that was my intention originally. I just wanted to sort of mess around with it and see how it sounded.
Well, you have brought a theremin today, so would you mind demonstrating the theremin for me? Okay. All right.
So this is the theremin. You see, if I move it, it reacts. This is volume. So the further you get away from this, the louder it gets. And then this is pitch. So pitch goes up, pitch goes down. And you want to try to get it so there's a little tuning thing here. So the lowest pitch you want is towards your body. And then you don't really tune it, because like the notes, it's always kind of, each time you turn it on, the notes are in a different place somewhere in the middle. So that's what makes it so hard, is kind of figuring out where the notes are. And I think the really, really good pros probably tune it in a very similar way and know exactly where the notes are. For me, it's just kind of trial and error each time. So I just get the low end, and then try to figure out where the octave is. Do you want to try?
Yeah. Great. Let's see if my pregnant belly is creating some. Mine really sounds more like a sci-fi movie.
So you're basically doing it right. Up and down doesn't do anything. It's distance from it.
Distance.
So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is the only up and down.
That's up
It's
and
volume.
down. Yeah, and then you can, if you want to like make individual, you can make individual notes by moving.
That's very cool.
In front of it. Or you can like make a note and then move to a different spot and make another note. And then you could add a vibrato if you shake your right hand. Yeah. Yeah. You like
Go.
find a note. And then add a vibrato.
Very cool. I give it back to the master.
I'm hardly a master. Yeah, it's pitch is hard without a backing track or without but yeah, if you do it enough times, you sort of feel where the notes are finally, and I think you try to sort of almost see in the middle where the notes are. So
Amazing. Justin Hurwitz, thank you so much for being here.
thank you for
The
having
movie
me.
is First Man, and you can check it out in theaters.